Ladies and gentlemen, it's Joe Age here with James, no last name, and Jorg Lorscheider. We're going to have a riveting conversation. I was running a little late. I was planning to shave, and then I decided I look good unshaven. And these boys are not shaven. James, what is your last name, and who are you with?
Last name is Carr, and I'm with QRA Corp.
And Lorscheider, which I know how to pronounce, is German, and it means what?
It means, I don't know what it means. My last
You don't
name.
know what it means?
No. Do you know? Do you know what Hage means?
I do, actually.
Oh, okay. I stand corrected. What does Hage mean?
It's actually in its native tongue pronounced Hajj, and it means a pilgrimage to Mecca.
Oh, a Hajj. Yeah, I know.
As I am 100% Syrian. You didn't know that.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But that's not.
I'm 100% German, but I don't know what Lorscheider means.
What does James Carr mean? Nothing.
Nothing.
Where are you from? I know that you're in Nova Scotia.
Yep.
In a time zone all your own.
That's right. Yeah, 1 p.m. here right now.
Who does that?
Special breed.
Let's get to the important business here. Jorg knows a thing or two about what James does, and Jorg was telling me offline, actually, I have a couple of clients who shall not be named, but they know who they are, who could really use software like James's. What is James's software, and why do you think that would be helpful to anyone? Go.
Yeah, so in my experience, I've been in the product development space for most of my career, and one of the things that is surprisingly lacking in projects that I see, which are hundreds, a year, and I find that companies just don't have a good handle on the requirements, and so. One of the things that's astounding about that is you always have to have requirements. There's got to be some way that you can communicate what you want to do to somebody else. And if you don't have a good requirements set, I'm not even talking about regulatory yet, which is a whole other story. You got to be able to communicate what it is that you want in some way other than just telling somebody, because you're not the only person working on it. There's going to be, multitude of engineers potentially. And all of them need to understand the big picture about what needs to be in that product. And I see startups coming all the time. They don't even have a product requirements document. If I was an investor, I'd probably ask for a product requirements document, because it would tell me a lot about how much they know about their market, what they, by what they're deciding to put into that product. So when we had an MDG Premium call with James, I learned a lot, learned things that I didn't even know about product development. And there's, in fact, standards with product development, doing requirements documents. And then James has a software that helps you do good product requirements documents. So I learned a lot in that meeting, and I'm, which surprised me because I've been in this business for a long time, so I thought it'd be valuable for somebody else. Yeah.
So I'm very intrigued by that. Has something happened in the industry? I recognize that he has a software, you believe, that does it well, but you used to do it other ways. What did you learn that was new, other than that there's a software that does this now?
Yeah, I learned that there's actually standards, or there are actually, say associations that have guidelines for how to write good requirements. I didn't know about those. I don't think it's anything new. I just think it's a lot of people. A requirements document can be anything, right? It can be a simple spreadsheet with lines on it, or it could be a very evolved document, something like what James's software would produce for you. but I don't even find even a list of features often, so and it just costs the companies money when they try to get into development and don't have good requirements defined, because we have to then spend time to define those requirements, and that just costs more time and money before you've even started development. So I think it's kind of a missing piece for a lot of companies.
What you consider to be a laughable document that you actually have received, and we could blur out the names of the
innocent
vendors, but I mean, to give people a sense, because as you both know, I'm a marketing strategist type. I don't write requirements documents about how my product is supposed to work and the technical specifications and things that I consider to be very hard.
I guess the most laughable document I'd like to show you some. I haven't looked them up, but the most laughable one is zero. We actually get zero. Like, there's no document. Here's what we want to do. We think, here's the market size. They know all this information about the market size and the total addressable market and all this other stuff, and yet they don't have a document that says what the features of the product are supposed to be. So I just find it's just incongruous.
So I'm thinking, like, somebody could ask you to make a
napkin sketch is a napkin sketch, right? That's the classic requirements document. It's the napkin sketch.
A handheld device, and it doesn't even tell you how tall it's supposed to be or how wide it's supposed to be, and just make it.
Exactly. They don't have what kind of test does it have to undergo? What kind of does it have to survive a drop test? Does it have to be able to what kind of electrical signals in it? What kind of voltages are they planning to use? What kind of there's so much detail even on a simple product that you don't know volumes, you don't know anything. So that's all stuff that we have to kind of pull out of clients.
Yesterday I attempted to file for my second PPP loan with Bank of America, and I actually got through it, and it said, you have submitted, hooray. And then I got an email today that said, you need to fix these 5 things or we're not taking your submission. And it's like, what? You're asking for 2019 numbers? I put in 2020 numbers. What do you need that for? And the project giving me money will not proceed until I accommodate these things. James, is your software like that? Like some combination of when it leaves your platform and goes into Jorg's hands, where you say, look, there are these 10 fields you must fill in. And until you fill them in, Jorg is not going to start your project. Is that the essence of what we're talking about?
It's close. What Scribe does, our product, is helps to take those requirements, and we have a direct integration with a system called EARS, the Easier Approach to Requirement Syntax, and that actually helps you with the way that you structure the requirements. So if you're completely unfamiliar with how a requirement should be formatted, you can start with EARS, and that actually helps you to
EARS?
EARS, yep. So okay. Easy Approach to Requirement Syntax. It's actually in the latest version of one of the documents that Jorg had mentioned. The International Council of Systems Engineering has the document called their Guide to Writing Requirements, the INCOSE Guide for Writing Requirements. And it's a list of 41 rules in the current version that if you're following all of those rules consistently, you can learn how to write a good requirement. And if you really do follow all of those rules to the letter, then you do end up with a clear and concise document. And then other supports like EARS are helpful in formulating what you want to say. So some of the big problems that we run into with requirements is that you're describing the way that you want your device to perform, or what you're expecting of your companies that you're working with that are going to be working on the development with you, without actually describing it in detail of like what's acceptable. So I think a good way to look at it is if you had a big open field as the range of possibilities of things that you could go with this device and things that it could do. If it's a napkin sketch, for example, and you start with, okay, we're going to have a product to sell. Okay, that gives you a very broad range of different things you could do. As long as you end up with something that you can sell, then yes, you have a product. So what the requirements process helps you to do is to put up the fences around, okay, as long as it meets these guidelines, it doesn't go way over here, it actually accomplishes this, then the product would be a success. And so if you can put up those fences around all of these different areas in terms of packaging and testing and what's required in these different areas, and actually define what is acceptable and what isn't, then what you should end up with at the end is there's some flexibility within those boundaries of exactly the shape and size and features that the product might include to accomplish those overall goals. But if you have those borders properly aligned to communicate with the other people that are on board with the project, so it could be the stakeholders for your own company, the people that are interested in the success of the project and are involved in working on it. And then it could be other organizations that come on board, like Jorg's, that are helping you with the actual development process and manufacturing process of the device. If you've actually laid out those boundaries of what the device is supposed to do and what it needs to do, then that gives you the creative design freedom within those bounds to create a project that's create a product that's innovative and unique and meets the goals without going outside of those boundaries. So in the end, if you can imagine a product that wouldn't meet the goals but would still fit within those fences, you need to tighten them up a little bit more. So what we see in the way that you actually write the requirements in the documents that we see is you'll see phrases like, oh, well, it needs to be easy to use. And then you say, okay, well, what do you mean by easy to use? And the conversation comes back to say, well, we'll design it. We'll worry about that later. Like, show me what you build, and then we can tell you if it's easy to use or not. And so there's a lot of other experts that are out there that can help with, human factors engineering and testing in those circumstances to help you define what those things are. But if you're not describing what it is, then
when I hear human factors engineering, I think about our MDG Premium friend Shannon Clark. That's her livelihood. Mm-hmm. Would a team typically have licenses with your software where the manufacturer and, say, somebody like Shannon, the human factors engineer consultant, would both access the thing as they prepare it before they hand it off to Jorg?
Yeah, so the way that it works is we have
a demo you can show us, maybe share your screen, show us something.
Yeah, sure, I can do that.
Yeah, it's also possible to, human factors engineering is also part of the design process as well. So the thing about requirements is they're always changing. They're never a perfect requirement, but you have to have, most of it there in order to start spending money, let's say, spending real money on a company like ours or what have you. So,
okay, what are we looking at?
Yeah, so this is a fairly low level. It's kind of getting into the detail of like the behaviors of this product. This particular example is a pacemaker, publicly available pacemaker specification. So you can see here some of the things that it's identified.
On the left looks like a Word document.
Yep, that's right.
So this looks like your fancy software.
That's right. So we have direct integrations with.
And red means bad.
That's right. Yeah. So you can see the scoring over there on the right. This is our direct integration with Word and Excel. Oh, sorry, Joe, go ahead.
So to avoid false, what am I looking at here? That's in red over there on the right. To avoid false sensing. Up.
Yeah.
Up.
So
up.
The first line item. So we avoid
this one here.
So this is red.
Yeah. So in this document, it's a collection of statements that are describing what the behavior of the product is supposed to be. And so most of them are made up of these shall statements. So saying, in this particular scenario, this is how we expect the device to respond. So these are what we call natural language requirements. So we're actually describing in words how we want the system to behave in these different situations. So that's how the kind of business team that's responsible for owning the product and developing what it's supposed to do communicates with the development team that's actually designing it. So they can check these different scenarios to make sure that it is doing the core functionality that it's supposed to do.
If I'm reading this properly, it's criticizing the fact that you use the word which.
Mm-hmm.
That's yes. The essence of this red mark. You said which, don't say which.
Yeah, the main issue with this one and why it received a score of 1 out of 5 is the lack of an imperative statement. So all of the other statements that you can see here include a shall statement. So it's actually saying in this particular scenario or when this happens, the system shall respond in this way. This is what we want to have happen. So in this particular section of the document, there's sort of a combination of these shall statements along with just kind of commentary that's associated with it. So this being highlighted as a requirement, it doesn't fit the bill as something that can actually be verified. And so if I scroll down to one of the other ones listed here, like this one that we had open, this one has a shall statement. So it meets that minimum standard of not having, and not missing an imperative. You should have one and only one shall statement in each of these requirements that you have. So that way, when the team goes back and looks at it, they can check off, you know, does it meet this expected behavior? If it does, you can sign off that that's been completed. And so the other parts of the score that you'll see get highlighted as you go through these.
What does blue mean?
Yeah, so in this case, the blue words enough and slow are being highlighted as immeasurable quantifications. So this is the behavior of the pacemaker under this particular situation that it's in. So it's talking about a...
You said a boat.
I did. That's Joe's favorite. So atrial tachycardia detection. So it's talking about the scenarios wherein these will apply. So I'll just read this one out loud. So the detection period shall be long enough that occasional premature atrial contractions do not cause unnecessary ATR therapy, nor cease necessary ATR therapy upon occasional slow beats. So in this case, those two words, you know, long enough, you have something in mind when you write that of saying what long enough would be, and you have something in mind when you say what an occasional slow beat is. So maybe that would be in a glossary somewhere that you've defined, but if you haven't, then that's room for misinterpretation, because the person who's actually responsible for programming this device and is going to be doing the architecture for it will have to go back then and ask, okay, well, what is long enough? So really, this particular example that we have is a requirement that hasn't been fleshed out to the point where it's actually a requirement yet, because there's nothing measurable about it, and you can't actually check off whether or not that's been met because you have this vague language. So that's a big part of the issues that we have. Yeah.
As a writer, I find this highly entertaining. Really, I do. Your basic. So I'm grossly oversimplifying. Does this software criticize writers? Is that what this thing does?
It does, yeah. So as opposed to just saying, like, you know, do you have good grammar and is your spelling okay? It's actually taking this against the best practices for requirement writing, largely based on the NCOSI guide for writing requirements. But that's really a more specific version than a lot of the standards that need to be followed as a part of ISO 13485 and MDR requirements for how your actual development process needs to work. They all, in some form or another, say the requirements need to be complete, unambiguous, and internally consistent. So what our software does is brings to the reader's attention those details. And the end goal isn't to say, you know, we had poorly written requirements and now we have well-written requirements. Thumbs up, great job. What it actually results in is causing the person who's writing this document to think through what it is that they're actually asking for.
But if you get 100 on your test, then this is the best possible requirements for this thing. So what is this? You have it looks like a 3 out of 6 quality score and a yield sign and 111 quality warnings.
Yeah, so for this set of requirements,
this document, it's 34 pages. I'm averaging 3 mistakes per page.
Yeah, so there's a lot with pulling in a document for the first time of ambiguity and unclarity, that when this is handed off to another team member, they're going to read it and have these same concerns with, okay, well, what exactly do you want to have happen in this case? So we have a combination of
anyone who might need your product would be afraid to buy it for being exposed to the fraud that they are, not knowing what they're doing.
Feeling positive going to Wendy's. Do you want anything?
Does anyone internationally want to go to Wendy's? Zachary is going to the Wendy's right now.
Hey, Zach, why don't you tell all of LinkedIn?
Yes.
You've just lost yourself Frosty privileges.
Hey, I have a free Frosty coupon in the Camry. Get that out, and I'll have a chocolate one. I bought one of those books for Halloween. I still have a coupon in there. You took the nice screen away.
I wanted to I couldn't see anything because I was on full screen, so I wanted to.
We were just
I wanted to
talking
get.
about ice cream.
I just wanted to get my Wendy's order, and I want a Frosty.
Mhm.
Well, I don't think you need a Frosty being in Nova Scotia.
Nova Scotia. Zachary says he has a bad feeling about sending it to you in the mail.
All right, maybe just some
I don't know.
fries.
Nova Scotia's
would be
pretty
better.
cold right now.
As a simpleton, what I've taken away is James's software criticizes poorly written requirements. Is that the whole thing? Is that the concept? Or is there more like, that's great, Joe, but that's just a third of what we do here?
Yeah, there's a combination of things. So if I go back to the other part, I mentioned those templates. So say, for example, you were writing and you didn't have any experience with requirement writing and you wanted to know how to describe your requirements. So we have these requirements templates built in. The latest version of the Nkosi guide actually has these referenced. It doesn't call them the ears templates, but that's what they are. And when you're using the requirements templates, then you can basically start with, okay, is this a requirement that's...
Let me put that back.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Is this a requirement that's true all of the time? So if it is, you can use this ubiquitous template to say, the system shall do this. If it's being defined by a particular state that the system is in, so in this case, it's talking about, going into this ATR duration mode, for example. So if you're talking about switching between different modes,
now because you
can use
all
these templates.
check marks.
Yeah, so that one is this is like the marking screen where you're showing QB Scribe which requirements to analyze. So then you click the analyze button and it'll take those 188 requirements and give you the scores. So if I were writing an event-driven requirement here, I can insert that template.
Is this not the same document we were in before?
This is the same one, yeah.
Okay, because now I'm seeing a whole bunch of green, which means good to me. What happened to my 111 warnings? Where did they go?
Yeah, so in this screen, since we're actually writing right now, this is the state where you're showing QB Scribe what requirements you want to have marked. So this is easier within an Excel spreadsheet. We have a direct integration with Excel as well. But what happens is when you click Analyze, it runs the 3 types of analysis. So the quality is looking at each individual requirement. And then we also do consistency and similarity, which are looking for consistent use of terminology, consistent use of units, and then also helping you find similar requirements within the document. So that's the difference. Now, since we're actually writing a requirement, we're into that other view.
So I see
that
this template is when blank, the blank does blank is a typical structure. How many typical structures are there in requirement sentences?
Yeah, so there's 5 different core templates within ears, and then there's also what they call complex requirements, which are a combination of those. So if you have, while the device is in a certain event, in a certain mode, and then a particular event takes place, what do you want it to do? That syntax helps you to actually formulate the requirement so that you're describing that behavior as clearly as possible. And it always puts the system response at the end. So you don't need to follow that syntax to use QV Scribe, but it is something that's built in to help folks that are maybe trying to roll out a more standardized approach across a larger team. An approach like that can be really helpful if you're using a tool like yours to do it. But aside from that, once you've written the requirement, that's when the QB Scribe analysis kicks in, and it's looking for things like proper use of imperatives and missing vague words, making sure that you're not using vague words, for example. And then the consistency and similarity check will actually help you look at the set of requirements altogether. So for example, in this one, I wanted to look at every time that centimeter is used, it'll highlight those in the document. And this allows you to see if you are using maybe a mixture of different systems of units, if you've maybe copy and pasted from different documents together. It lets you get a quick snapshot of that.
So if I use centimeters here and inches there kind of thing? Exactly.
So that can cause problems when you're into actual coding.
My marketing brain is thinking, do you as a lead generation for your own business say, come you unwashed masses, send me your crappy documents, I could upload it into the system and give you a quality score?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's
gold right there. And then be like, oh my God, I suck. How much do I need to pay for this license?
Right. That is what they would say. I mean, yeah, that's how it would go. So what you're looking at,
the primary way that you generate leads? Send me your crappy documents and I'll give you a score.
Yeah, it's not always the first step that people take because a lot of the times there are multiple stakeholders involved and they all have different kind of confidentiality requirements. So there's different events that we can, or different approaches that we can take. There's an individual version of this that can just be installed on sort of one local workstation. The actual enterprise version of it that most of our customers use has floating licensing setup where we actually can save your analysis configurations and share them across the whole team. So if you, for example, are using must instead of shall in your document, you can make that change to the configuration so it's looking for the language that you actually want to flag.
How do you guys have the bandwidth to create a website / landing page where I upload a document, you give me a score, tell me I'm crap, and then like make me buy limited versions of things so I can actually fix some of the crap, or just know that I'm crap? And be like, man, I have to figure out why this is so crappy and this system will tell me. It just seems like a great way to hook someone into wanting to buy the system.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that we're exploring. There's not currently a web version, for a website that you can go to, but we do have a direct integration now with dedicated requirements management tools. So we are in the browsers now as well. So what you're looking at here is
dedicated requirement. What did you say?
Yeah, so this is a requirements management tool. So this is actually one by IBM called Doors Next, and it's a browser-based management tool where within the tool itself, you can write and sort and connect your requirements. So this is what Jeff Gable is talking about when he says he doesn't think he won't work on projects where people are only managing the requirements within Word and Excel, because using a dedicated tool like this is really helpful in making sure that your requirements are traced through properly from the user needs through to requirements.
And so Jeff Gable is home here on. Oh, he's on.
There we go.
Hey.
So in the management tool itself, we have a browser extension that runs that allows you to integrate directly with these tools. So I can either look at the quality of this individual requirement and make changes to it here. So this one has 2 shall statements. So if I were to edit this so that I'm only having one shell statement included here, and then I can break the other part in, it will reanalyze that and give me an updated score. And then when I close out QV Scribe, it updates the text within the management tool. So we have direct integrations with IBM Doors Next, which is what's open here. Also Polarian, which is gaining popularity in medical devices for managing requirements, and another tool called JAMA as well. So direct integrations with those 3. And then you can also look at the whole set of requirements together. So whether you're looking at your requirements in Word or Excel or in this management tool, you can see the same quality analysis from those different perspectives.
I have to do a quick plug for me, and that is, and I don't know if he's going to see this, his light's on. Oh, I just sent it to, no, I sent it to you boys. I didn't send it to him, so he saw absolutely nothing.
I saw it.
Yes. So Jeff Gable, who we just mentioned, is a member of MDP Premium, as are these 2 fine gentlemen. And because I see that he's online, I'm pinging him and saying, hey, join this conversation. So one of the reasons that you might consider being part of Premium is we have a nice little family, and we bounce ideas off one another and share opportunities. And maybe Jeff will come on and say something smart, and then someone will say, wow, Jeff is smart, and then they will hire him. Or maybe they will say Jorg is smart, although they're more likely to say that James is smart. Now, can we change James's, oops, I didn't mean to delete him. I wanted to change his name. Can I do that?
If you
so while you're doing that, I wanted to say that so I think really what it boils down to is, we need to have some better education about requirements, what they are, how they're written. That's number 1 in general. And then number 2 is, requirement is an actual essential document for any medical device because the FDA requires you to have it. So you need an SRS, a software requirements document. You need a PRS or PRD, depending on your acronym, product requirements documents. And those are must-haves for any 510K submittals or anything like that. So it just seems to me that this is something that startups don't spend a lot of time on, are very unsophisticated about, and need further education about it. And I thought, James, this whole conversation, you can obviously tell that there's a lot of detail here. There's a lot going on that's beyond make a list of what I think it needs to do. And educating yourself on that, I think, is something that every startup, every company should really spend some time on.
Well, there's two parts to it, like you were saying, Jorg, where it is required by the FDA to do this, and I believe it's in CFR 21 they have recommending that 30% of the time, total project time, should be spent on the requirements. So you can do it the easy way, or you can do it the hard way. The reason that they have this as part of the design control process is that it actually helps you develop better products. It improves the efficiency and helps you actually deliver something that performs the way it's expected. So you can either develop your project the slow and inefficient way, and then get to the end and say, oh crap, we have to go back and write in all the requirements now, and you get no benefit of going through that requirements process. Or you can take the time up front to define what the project is supposed to be before you go into the later stages and actually get the benefit of working through that process.
I can tell you the biggest fear for any developer is a last minute requirement. Like, oh, but we wanted to do this. Well, wait a minute. You can't add that requirement at the end. I mean, that could affect every system in the entire product. And it's just like, wow, you guys, if you don't know that already, you're in trouble. You need to know that about your business. There are always minor things that change because it's development. It's not a, you don't know what you don't know. So there is some flexibility in the system, but to the degree that you can, you really must define things define things up front.
Jeff writes, damn, I'm in another meeting, or I would have loved to. And I wrote, punt on that crappy meeting and join ours. So I guess that's a no.
Yeah.
Well, Jorg, I mean, how many clients do you have at any given time at Omnica?
Somewhere between 15 and 20.
And speaking of none of them directly, how many of their requirements documents right now are ambiguous enough that it would be great if we threw it into the system?
Well, now, because we're already in development, I would say sometimes it has limited value to go back, but depending on how far we've gone. But all of them would have benefited from going through a more rigorous requirement process.
About now, is there a point at which it's like, what's the point now? I mean, we're already...
Well, if we've already invested, hundreds of thousands of dollars on the development, and we already have a prototype here in front of us, and you've probably already muddled through most of the requirements at that point, so it probably doesn't make sense to go back. But again, to the degree that you can, you should, because that's when it's inexpensive to do so, is up front. When you start getting engineering engaged, now it's costing a lot of money every day, and so.
What do you think about the notion of, kind of back to my PPP loan example, from now on, Omnica will do no work until it passes James's QV Scribe good requirements document?
That would be really nice, but you know what? We'd have no business.
Is that right?
Yes.
Because no one will agree.
Well, no, the level of expertise in requirements development is so low in the industry that we would have no business.
Well, isn't that what James's system does? It elevates it by showing them the right way to do it.
It does, but again, people have to buy that. The market has to be educated, right? It's not, and that takes a very long time. So I think not only is it the syntax that we're talking about with James's product, which I think is wonderful. You have to think. You have to change the way you think. You have to think about things. You have to think about a requirement. Okay, how do I validate this requirement? Can I validate this requirement? What's the test I'm going to use to validate that requirement? There's just a lot of, you have to think engineering, and a lot of people don't have that thought process. So I think honestly, I have never seen a requirement that couldn't have benefited from James's software tool. Even the best ones don't have the syntax down. The best ones have all the stuff in there, but there's ambiguities and there's all these conflicts, which we can work through. But
I'm trying to problem solve now for really both of you and the industry. If we accept that, and James, is there any software in the market like yours that you're aware of?
So there are different solutions like within dedicated management tools. So if you're using Polarian, there is a dedicated tool within that. There's one within Doors that only work within those tools. So with QV Scribe, what large organizations like is different development teams are using different software. So you can have one common experience with QV Scribe to say, like, this is the standard that we're going to follow. And the customizability. So being able to say, you know, for example, from the Nkosi guide, you have no vague language is one of the requirements. Well, that itself is a vague requirement because everybody's going to have a different interpretation of what's vague. So with the QV Scribe system, the way that it works is we have a standard list. There's about 90 terms in that one column of being considered vague. You know, this really isn't appropriate for a requirements document, but there could be other terms that a particular team or an even organization agrees that, hey, in our context, this is actually okay. We have a pen called the Easy to Use 5000, and we don't want to be flagged every time Easy to Use is used. That's fine. You can remove that from the list and add your own terms in. So as you develop these libraries, you can use them across a team as well. Sorry, Joe?
Who are the architects of your system? Are there some big names with big experience to be like, wow, that person worked at such a place, that's a credible person to build a system like this? Do you have that kind of cred behind you?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, the medical device industry is very private in terms of, you know, they don't like taking their dirty laundry and showing it to everybody in terms of specific examples that they have. But in other industries that we've worked with, we have teams at organizations like Honeywell, Lockheed Martin, where we've come from aerospace. In oil and gas, we're working with like Chevron and Shell have global deployments of our software within the management tools that they're using. And then the big names in medical devices certainly are using it as well. It's just with our agreements with them, it's not or not able to name them. And
what percent of your business is in medical device?
Say that again. Sorry.
What percent of your business is in medical device?
It's our second largest industry. Yeah, second to oil and gas right now, and yeah, so that would be about 25% of our customers would be medical device customers.
Does it make sense for some, if it's not Jorg's companies, maybe a smaller, some shop to position themselves as the, you know, we're going to work on efficient, well-written requirements, and we will reject anyone who's not up to that standard. I mean, it sounds like a smart positioning for some agency willing to, and even if, you know, if like Jorg says, well, we'd have no business. Well, maybe part of your business is, you know, maybe you add a requirements writing arm where when you engage Omnica, we're going to walk you through, we're going to have a license to QV Scribe, and we're going to jointly create a requirements before we spend the big bucks on things that we're going to have to undo. It just sounds smart.
It is smart. And, you know, often the way we handle that now is we call it a phase 0, really. So it's not a phase 1, it's the pre-phase of the development process where we do a phase 0, and that's where we're really doing their job, which is analyzing the requirements and making sure we understand and they understand exactly what we're going to be developing. That's typically how we deal with this. But I think, yeah, it would be wonderful to be able to. The problem is the people who answer the questions are not us, right? The only people who can answer these questions is the people who
also say You can
No
also
one or
ask
the
the
company.
question again until you get it in a way that you can translate to an effective requirement.
Yeah, and maybe that's the
mean,
way to frame your other question, Joe, to Jorg, would be to say, if a company that was going to hire you came to you with a complete set of requirements, of course, there's still going to be changes and requirements come up later on that have been missed and things like that. But if they had a good starting point that they didn't have to start with phase 0 with you, what impact would that have in terms of what your relationship with them would look like and how you'd be able to develop the product?
James, can you sell some type of enterprise version where on the back end, he can run every requirements document he gets through his system, which it may not be in that person's face, but he can go back and say, hey, I was looking over your documents and over here it says which. Can we make this shall, or like, and just basically go down to get your 111 down to a 50 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then it wouldn't, maybe he doesn't even let the client know that the engine for his vast requirement writing intelligence is your software.
Well, so that would make me look smart, which is always a good thing, right?
It can hurt.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's different arrangements that we have with customers. Yeah, there could also be a scenario with a company like Jorg's where they are working with so many different organizations where, we could set up his company with a certain number of floating licenses and, allow them to be used by partners on teams where they're collaborating together, that they'd be able to access a license to be able to, flesh out the requirements a little bit more on their own before coming to the next meeting. Another workflow is PDF export feature. So in any version of the tool, whether you're in Doors, Polarian, JAMA, Word, Excel, you can generate a PDF report that takes those requirements and gives you a PDF that has all of the issues highlighted on it that you can go through. Even if you don't have the software installed, you can look at that PDF and see where the quality score issues are. And it gives you a framework for those requirement review meetings that you're going into, where you have something, okay, here are the issues that we need to discuss and make sure that we're all clear on these terms that sound like they are vague and could be misconstrued. So we want to make sure that everybody's on the same page.
It definitely sounds like something that people should have. I mean, at the engineering companies, it just seems like an obvious.
Yeah, I think it's also something that
call and they understood what the value prop is, as I now do.
Yeah, I think it's also something that big companies, obviously pay more attention to, and they have teams and they want to spend money on these tools and do things right. But I think some way to get this suite of information and these tools to the smaller guy, the startups.
Mm-hmm.
Half of our business is startups, half of our business is big companies. To be able to get it to some of the smaller companies, either through a SaaS platform or through some other way, like using us or whatever,
mm-hmm.
does make sense because that's who really needs it a lot. And a lot of innovation in the US is these small companies. It's not coming from the big companies. They're doing incremental innovation mostly. They're not doing the real big innovations. Are all coming from startups and then get bought by the big companies. So
James, we should have talked about this in advance, but anyone watching this video, call James and use code JOEHAGE so I get 50% commission. I think that's fair because
yeah, we should have talked about it beforehand, I guess. Here we are.
Well, we should have talked. You should have got the Wendy's order in beforehand as well. So
that's true.
On that.
All these missed opportunities left and right. Well, I'm sated. I mean, I feel as though I definitely understand why Jorg feels James's software is incremental. And James, I'm like, how do you guys develop a strategy, a go-to-market strategy that gets all the Jorg organizations of the world to have this and as software that they use when they get crap?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Jorg, you've been doing this for 30 years. You say you've never received a requirements document that couldn't have been either improved a little or vastly improved.
I would say that's a safe statement.
But let
I
me
mean,
ask
the best ones could have been improved a little bit by a tool like this, and and then it just goes down from there.
the value to the manufacturer who's paying you could have been measurable. What's the value to you, though, besides less frustration? I mean, theoretically, doesn't Omnica earn more when inefficient customers ask you to run up hours by doing work over and over again? Is there a disincentive for the financially motivated engineering firm to be efficient?
That's a good question. I think it's very similar to things that you have, like, you know, people who are creative and people who are professional, they love to see their work get produced. And when you interfere with that process in some way by throwing in a late requirement or causing, ambiguities and things, it really frustrates us because we want to deliver a product that's successful in the market.
The money, Jorg, the money.
But the money, the money is the money is somewhat secondary, to be honest, because I think we have to, in order to maintain the creativity that we have and maintain the people that we have, they have to be satisfied with the work that they're doing. That's why people stay here for 17 plus years. And so if we're always giving them projects where it's a nightmare to deal with, they're not going to stay. And this is one of the reasons why it's a big key differentiator for us. So I think having a great requirement is actually fun, and it's more fun to do the development, and it's more creative, allows us to be creative within the bounds, as James said. And that's what we live for. We live for doing that.
Campaign right there. Have more fun with TV Scribe. James Carr, let's see, working efficiently also makes customers happy and leads to better referrals. It's true, says a LinkedIn user who shall not be identified.
And that is very true. Yes.
And what you run into also is you have
Caitlin Morse, my buddy. Hi, Caitlin Morse.
You have the individual small team, for example, that doesn't have the resources to develop a whole requirements engineering department that's going to learn all the best practices and come up with their handbook and follow all the best practices. And that presents its own challenges. But then for the larger organizations, you have this issue of standardization, where you have sort of a brand that when you go to a partner organization that you're working with, there's an expectation of quality in those requirements, and there's a more stringent expectation from the FDA and organizations that are auditing you to be able to say, like, hey, are you following all of these practices, and are your requirements clear and compliant? So there's across that whole spectrum, there's everybody in the middle that has, doesn't have the resources to develop the whole department, still has the need for well-written requirements. And you have, as the team grows, you have a bigger challenge with getting consistency with, okay, how are we going to say this, and what language are we going to use, and what's not allowed? And QB Scribe just acts as sort of that mediator that's a single source of truth, where you know that the language that's going to be enforced is there. And then there's the additional tools like the consistency checks and similarity and things like that just help you find other problems that are difficult to read if you're just looking at black and white text and reading it kind of start to finish and looking at those.
And I'm not going to ask you to divulge pricing here, but I'd love to know that yours is a very reasonably priced software, and it would be foolish to be penny wise and pound foolish and not get this.
Definitely. We need to look at the, value proposition with every customer. But what we are willing to do and are always flexible on is we'll look at your situation. We use floating licenses in our enterprise version because the development cycles that you go through, you might be writing requirements really heavily for a short time and then not so much for a while. So that allows teams to sort of fluctuate. What we do with smaller teams is, we'll look reasonably at the amount of time that you're planning to be in the requirement stage and come up with something that makes sense for you for the time that you're using it and what you're using it for.
You'll hook up Caitlin with the Joe H discount?
Definitely.
Thank
Carr, Mr. Lorscheider, my pleasure. Thanks for the time.
Thank you very much.
My friend.
Yes.
Listen.
Yeah, feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and I will do my best to respond via LinkedIn or otherwise.
James, what about privacy and IP concerns, included unintended crossover?
Yes, that's a really great question. So our analysis, whether you're using it in the browser or on the local workstation, the analysis itself only happens on the local workstation. So whatever tools and systems you have in place to manage and keep your requirements on your network stay with you. So the analysis doesn't, your requirements are never sent back to us, unless of course you send them to us directly for us like a sample report. But once you have the software installed in your environment, your data stays with you. So we don't have any, we don't look at your documents, analyze them on our side. It happens all on your network and on your workstation.
Okay.
Does that answer that?
It does, but I'm going to get out of here before people ask more questions. James and Jorg's contact information are right here in the top of this post. You can click through, ask to be their buddies, tell them you saw them on the Joe Hage show, and make it a great day, everyone. Thanks,
Thanks, guys.
Okay,
Thanks, James. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah.